How's it going? McNeil coming from the garage. Working a little bit on this guy. Just got home from work and I've been smoothing out some of this neck stuff, working on some tendons and sort of more straining, trying to get this expression really to pop off, to make him look like he is in pain, about to have the top of his head completely blown off. And I wanted to bring up an issue that my impatience has created. And that is, and I did the same thing with Amy, and I made a video about her when I did it, but obviously that was sort of lost to the ether on the original latex mask central, so I figured I would broach this again. And this also answers a little bit of a question, because I see a lot of people asking on molds, what are those rods that are sticking out of the eyes when you're doing a sculpture? Well, had I not been impatient, I would have used eye blanks. These are eye blanks. And the premise behind these is that you use these in your sculpture. These rods are removable so that when you're sculpting, you can take them out. And when you go to make your mold, you put the rods back in. These rods, actually these threaded rods, stay in the mold so that when you pour your latex or silicone or whatever you're doing, that the eyelids and the recess for the eyeball are part of your casting. And what that allows is for you to take a custom eye like this. These are Jerry eyes, and are the same dimension as these eye blanks. You pop them in, and now this backside rests against the material that your mask is made out of, and the eyelids will fit perfectly because you've created an exact pocket for this eye. Now, trouble comes into paradise when you get ahead of yourself and you get really, really excited and so far down a road, and you use these cheap Halloween eyes. They're fine. They're fine for their purpose. They're great. You know, they're a couple bucks, you know, $8 or $9 a pair or something like that, maybe 14 at the most. And they're fine. They're small. Not only they're small, they don't have the rods on them. And what does that mean? That means when I go to make a mold of this guy, this eye is going to be cast in that mold. So when I pour latex in that mold, it's going to have a latex eyeball in there that I will have to cut out in order to use a custom eye like this in that hole. Not the end of the world by any measure, and I'm still sort of contemplating what I'm going to do about that. But in preparation for the potential that I'm going to bite the bullet and cut these eyeballs out, I took a look at these and realized that the problem with this is how far away, how tall they are. And the reason that's a problem is because I'm using an Alana head, and these eyeballs are sitting right against the plastic of Alana. And by that I mean, this is an Ed head. I use the Alana specifically because her features are small, more delicate, and it does not dictate my sculpture so much that I end up having to alter my sculpture in order to accommodate her nose or the lack of eye recesses, no mouth recess, all of that stuff. Particularly on a character like this, because this is a little bit larger than 1:1, so that when it shrinks, it'll be 1:1 in human head size, right? If I did that on this, then you'd probably end up with a mask that's a little larger than 1:1. So it's my preference to use Alana. Ed doesn't see much action, but this is a good example. So if I were to take this eye blank, and when I started this, and if I were to put this on to this Ed head, see how far out that eyeball sticks? Which means that my sculpture is that much further out than this face. And you see how large Ed's nose is there? So what happens is you end up with a sort of disproportionate sculpture. His face becomes very elongated. The back of his head has to accommodate, or the front of his face has to stick out in order to utilize an eye blank like this. Not a big deal if you're doing a wearable mask. Actually, this armature is amazing, particularly if you're doing wearable masks, because you know, if you've got a large nose on your armature, then you're building everything out, so it'll accommodate all kinds of head sizes. So this is a great armature. Don't get me wrong. Alana, for what I'm doing, these sort of like display masks, makes more sense for me. And probably in the future, I may even take some advice from some of the members here and start working with my own armatures. I need to figure out how to make those. But anyway, this is a problem. It's even a problem on Alana in some cases, particularly if you go ahead and start your sculpt and you get this far down the road and realize, man, I should have used eye blanks, because what am I going to do about that? And the beauty of these eye blanks is it creates that pocket for the eye. It creates a perfect eyelid, particularly with this guy. He's got these sort of heavy eyelids. It just makes your life a lot easier in regard to eyes. So what do you do if you didn't use this and you use that? Well, you're going to have to dig those out if that's the route that you go, but where do you go from there? Because you really can't squeeze that in. You're going to have to resculpt everything. So I got in touch with Tim over at Four Seal Studios, and just like on my Amy sculpt, I had him make me some of these. And so what these are eye blanks. They have the same outer radius as one of his customized, but they have this recess which accommodates the actor's eyeball, right? So they sit further back. And you know what these are for, as he explained to me, was like if you're doing prosthetics of an actor, you would take a life cast and then you would put this, and this recess here accounts for the actor's actual eyeball, and then they would make an eye shell for you, like with these dimensions, and they would fit perfectly over the actor's eyeball and within the eyelids of the sculpture that you're doing. So, so I had to make me some of these, and if I decide to, gosh, it's going to be a hard decision to make, to dig these out, then these will go in and take the place. Now you may say, well, you know, this is a lot taller than that, but what really matters, particularly on something like this, is not necessarily the depth, because you can always dig out the latex and a little bit of the foam in order to accommodate an eyeball. It's the eyelid, right? The inner side of that eyelid, so that the eye actually fits up against the latex. And so I can always, again, tear out that piece of latex and a little bit of the foam in order to accommodate that. But this allows me to have an inner eyelid with that perfect radius. Otherwise, what's going to happen here is I'm going to have to cut these eyeballs out. I'm going to end up with a hole there that I'm going to have to fill with an eyeball and something else. This side won't be that difficult in that regard, but that is such a squinty little eye, I'm going to have to squeeze an eyeball in there somehow anyway. I may end up having to do it from the top, but or maybe even from the bottom. I've in the past, sometimes I've inserted, like in the case of Amy, inserted the teeth from the back side rather than the front side. So yeah, so there you go. So this would go in there, and basically how that works is, I'll show you the inside of a couple of molds here. So a traditional eye blank is going to look like, let's see if I can get over here. That. So you see those eye blanks in there. So those are standard eye blanks. On Amy, however, if you want to take a look, you can see that those are just the shells. And they work great. So not quite as convenient or as easy as dealing with this, because it doesn't solve the full issue, but what it does do is it solves the eyelid issue, and in my opinion, that's the most important thing. The depth of this eyeball is not really that big a deal. It can be overcome. The eyelid issue and having to cut out eyes and Dremel the lids, and oh my God, it's just a whole thing. So we'll see. I may actually try to turn these into eye blanks of sort by very carefully maybe dremeling a threaded hole into these. I don't know if that's even possible. And using these as eye blanks with it, because they're already there. But we'll see. Anyway, hopefully that helps. If anybody had any questions about eye blanks and maybe how to deal with eye blanks and a armature that has protruding eyeballs. Yeah, that's where I'm at. And I'm going to keep scratching at this guy. Oh, one final thing. Thanks for everybody who chimed in on Sunday. I was able to fix my rake, at least temporarily, with some epoxy epoxy putty. That's worked out really well. Looks like I need to put a little more there on the corner. But this stuff sets super fast, and it's super rigid, and it's doing the trick. I'm able to smooth this stuff out. So there you go. Here's a look at their scanners, dude. We're getting closer. And I think I'm finally getting that anguished look on his face and no more Tom Hanks. So there you go. Hope everybody's having a good night, and we'll talk to you soon.